Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I am the lead learner at the SCEA's Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves COOL. You can see our logo here in the upper right-hand corner. And welcome to tonight's live stream. Really excited about tonight's guest. Before we get started with that, before I introduce our guest, just want to remind everybody, it's so important right now for us all to get registered to vote. If you're not currently registered to vote, please go out and make sure you do that. I think that the cutoff date to get registered is October 8th. You can learn more about that at the scea.org/votes. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the SCEA is the only teacher organization in the state who's come out and endorsed Lisa Ellis for South Carolina Superintendent of Education. We believe that's of critical importance, and we believe this race is really, really important to all public school employees and students. If you would like to learn more about her campaign, you can text the word Ellis to 48744, and you can go to lisa4sc.com to learn more about her campaign. The other thing we'd like you to do is to connect with us. If you're not currently a member and you just like to learn more about the SCEA, well, we'd like to learn more about you. Go to the scea.org/connect and fill out that information form, and we will connect with you, and you can stay connected with us. And no obligation here, but we would love to have you learn more about our movement and how you can be a part of it. And of course, our website for all of the live streams that we do is cool.us. That's CEWL.us. And there you'll find tonight's live stream will be archived there along with every other live stream that we do. So we invite you to go to that website and bookmark it, and you're going to see some updates to that website this week. So let's talk about tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Kristina MacBury. I think I said her name right. She is a co-mom of 11, and 11. You heard that right. Co-mom of 11, an award-winning principal in the tri-state Philadelphia area, NASSP Digital Principal, and an author of Principal Pro, an Authentic Leadership Playbook for managing crisis, building teams, and maximizing resources. She's a contributing author of the 100 no-nonsense things all leader, teachers, and parents should stop doing series, and co-founder of Educate for Hope. She is a fierce mental health advocate for education and access for all, and she is also a die-hard Phillies fan. And I was so thrilled when she agreed to come on and share, because those of you who know me and know what we're trying to do with our center, mental health is such a core component of what we're trying to do, because we see a lot of educators, a lot of students, a lot of public school employees suffering in terms of their mental health. And we've got to make this a priority. So without further ado, let's bring on Kristina. Kristina, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome and so excited to be here with you tonight, Todd.
Yeah, I am excited to learn from you. And there's so much that we can talk about. We could do, dozens of these sessions on mental health and talk about it in a variety of different ways. But I'm looking forward to what you have to bring tonight, and appreciate you being here. And I want to encourage everybody who's watching, if you have comments or questions, all you have to do is go down into the Facebook comments, type in your question, type in your comment. We can bring that on live. You'll see like Keneal's watching, and she's already commenting, and we appreciate that. And anybody who's up watching can interact with us that way. We'd love that. So I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to pull up your presentation and let you just go ahead and teach us what you have for us tonight.
Well, thanks, Todd. And thank you to everybody for being here. First and foremost, arming is a model that I have, and we can use it for many different things, but really looking at shifting our paradigm from surviving to thriving as it relates to mental healthiness. And I think that that's one thing that perhaps positively that the pandemic has afforded us, is this ability to recognize and establish that mental healthiness, overall well-being, is something that is really critical for us in order for learning to be able to take place. So I'm not really thankful for the pandemic, but as a learner, we move forward and we learn from our experiences. And you shared a little bit about me. So there's my family right there in the middle. We are a big family with 11 kids. Our youngest is 14. Our youngest is 38. And we have a lot of diverse experiences within our family. We have 4 adopted from Bogota, Colombia. And so we have had a few mental health challenges that we've experienced and lived with in our household. And, you know, interestingly enough, I do not find myself as an expert. You know, we're learning alongside each other. I've had the privilege to learn from and learn with so many brilliant people in our field as well as in the mental health field. And so I hope to share that information as we go on. And as Todd said, if you have any questions or anything to add or contribute, please do so. I am an avid Phillies fan. Thank you, Keneal. And the Braves are really tearing us up right now. So lots of positive vibes for the Phillies. Would greatly be appreciated. I am principal at Sarah Pyle Academy in Wilmington and Newark, Delaware. We have branched off into 2 new campuses this year, and also the virtual academy. And that's really important to me because for the majority of my 27 years in education, I was a turnaround specialist, and I was pretty good at it, following the data. And I was afforded this awesome opportunity at Sarah Pyle, which is well, first off, it's Sarah Pyle Academy. So every day is a day at spa. I mean, how cool is that? And yet it's non-traditional. So we meet kids at their education level, and it really allowed us to focus on overall well-being. And when the pandemic happened, it really gave us an awesome foundation to do what was right by kids first, leverage our relationships, and then move forward. And I'm glad you brought that question up about balance, and I will be talking about that because the balance is always a give and take all throughout, and we have lots of ideas about that. And then advocate. So for me, it's not enough just to be and to work in the field, but also to advocate and move forward for that change. And I'm going to encourage you to do that as well. So super excited, again, like I said, to be here. And also want you to know that I couldn't be here without the mistakes that I've made. And so none of this was easy. And it's been an evolution for me. Again, 27 years, 20 as an administrator, and 10 here at Sarah Pyle Academy. And that was a very long time to get where we are. So a lot of things that I'm going to be sharing about my school and my experience, these are not things that just happened yesterday or since the pandemic. So I really want you to take note of that as we move forward. What's really important, and I know we've all heard it before, is that what you feel is what you spill. I remember a story a very long time ago about somebody who was at an airport and they were just leaving Dunkin' Donuts, and they hit some woman in the arm and they spilled all over them. And the person who was presenting said, "Do you know what they spilled all over me?" And everybody was like, "Well, coffee. It was Dunkin' Donuts, you know?" And she was like, "Yeah, exactly." And that really resonated for me, especially with the what you feel is what you spill, because what's in your cup is literally what's coming out. And I know that is something that resonated for me. And I don't know if it resonates for you too. We're all wearing different hats: parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, pet owners, educators, teachers, counselors, administrators, and whatever is filling up our cup is what's going to come out despite our best efforts. So if we're stressed, stress is going to come out. If we're anxious, anxiety is going to come out. So it's really, really, really important that we take care of ourselves first, because even though I know we all have the best intentions to do right by our students and by our schools, it's inevitable that what's in our cup is what's going to come out of our cup. So, that adage when the masks come down on an airplane, put yours on first. Think about that cup. You can put in whatever you want. You put Coke in your cup, Coke's going to spill out. If you put happiness and relaxation, that's what's going to spill out. And so I want you to continue to think about that as we talk about this. Also, something to subscribe to. So I subscribe to this idea of school happiness agency. And it's really important for mental healthiness to consider this as a possibility within your schools. And that is our responsibility and the ability to create, influence, encourage, and assume the responsibility for actions that will enhance the experience of joy, overall well-being, connectedness, sense that one's life is good, and meaningfulness. Let that sit in for a second. And as that's settling in, it's really a different kind of perspective when we think about what our schools are for and what our education institutions are for, a responsibility to encourage these positive things. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Nell Nodding. She is one of the most influential writers, philosophers for me. Her and Sean Akers. I don't know if you've also read Happiness Advantage, changed my life. But Nell prescribes to the school of thought that happiness and education go hand in hand. And, there was a time in education when we were talking about grit, and that we had to provide these opportunities for our students to develop the grit in order to be successful for life after high school and life in general. And Nell has this idea that we do not need to create adverse activities for our kids or adverse, difficult situations, because life is already going to provide those opportunities. And instead, we really need to focus on things like school happiness agency so that we can provide the environment for our kids to thrive. Now, this is my philosophy and my school of thought, and it's really helpful when you're talking about a positive mindset moving forward, especially when we're thinking about overall well-being. And I'm more than welcome to engage in a conversation about that. But I want to be really clear. This is not about toxic positivity, right? Everything is not good all the time. And it's okay not to be okay. But I saw this meme the other day, and it just really also resonated for me. Positive thinking won't let you do anything, but it will let everything you do, everything better than negative thinking will, right? So it's just thinking and rewiring your brain to think and recognize positive things. It's not that negative things are not going to happen. It's not that people aren't going to feel happy and not be in a bad mood or have crisis or challenges, but it's just kind of a mindset overall. And with that being said, the reality is that anybody can be anywhere on a continuum of mental healthiness. So this is from the Same Here Foundation, and I encourage you to check them out later. They are super cool, and I've worked with them on a number of different projects. And this continuum that they have is from healthy to crisis, right? So you can be from thriving, which is healthy, all the way to sinking, right? And we can be anywhere on this at any moment in time. Like right now, I'm a little bit anxious, right? So probably right between, surviving and fluctuating. I'm excited. And then as I continue on this presentation, I'm going to be going more to gliding and thriving. You might have had a really long day. You could be in that struggling in that orange after you connect with your family, after you eat, the pressures of the day kind of relax. You can go somewhere on that scale. And that is really okay. And that's really life, right? It does not necessarily mean that you're in a challenge, crisis situation where you need connection or help when we're thinking about mental healthiness. And I really like this graphic, especially for our kids too, because it's okay not to be okay all the time. Again, not talking about toxic positivity. But as we think about this shift in paradigm to mental healthiness, it's really important that, and we're going to talk about how in a moment, to reflect on these patterns. So if we are constantly in that struggling orange category day after day after day, and it's not allowing us to move forward in a way that's productive, you no longer really feel like going to work, or you don't want to go out socially, or food doesn't taste the way it used to, then there's something that perhaps, you could look into, or somebody, if it's one of our students, that we might be looking at to align some kind of services or support. And then one more big umbrella item as we move forward. So as we're talking about mental healthiness and overall well-being, it makes me think about the global goals here. So by 2030, we're looking at ending or at least eliminating poverty, fighting equality, and peace. And in order to do that, if you look at number 3, mental healthiness and overall well-being is one of the top three goals. So this isn't just about having schools feel happy or touchy-feely or whatever some folks say that feel like, it's really not the focus of education. But this is really something that, the United Nations had identified in 2015 as part of our priorities in order to get to that place in and 30. So this really is a high leverage focus and something that we can do on a daily basis to really shift that pendulum in order to get us to where we could be in order to be providing the maximum support and shift that pendulum again from just barely surviving to thriving in a more meaningful way. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking for a second here. I want you to think about and put in the chat box, where are you in your journey? So is this something in mental healthiness in general for your school, your program, your classroom? Is this something that you've been doing for a long time and you're attaining the summit? Are you reaching the base camp, or are you just still surveying the mountain or preparing to climb? Because this is really important as we move forward in this conversation for your mindset as you move forward. As I had shared, we've been doing this for a long time, so we're probably reaching base camp. We still have a lot to do, but where we're at in our current efforts is reaching the base camp. So I want you to take a second, 3 or 4 seconds to think about that. All right. So now that you know where you are, let's think about how we're going to move this forward. So we had talked a little bit about the ARM model. So the ARM model is acknowledge, reflect, model, and manifest. And I got to be honest. So this model first came out right before the Parkland shooting. And my wife and I were like, it just really doesn't seem like the best timing to talk about arming and arming our schools and arming our staff as it relates to anything right now. So we backed off for a while. It wasn't until I had a partnership with Pushing Boundaries and Dr. Rick Jetter, and Rebecca Coda. I don't know if you know them, but they are some really cool authors, as well as big gurus in education. Actually, Rick was just named one of the top 30 gurus in education last year. And so they asked us to contribute to a couple of different books with them. So one of them was the top 100 no nonsense things that teachers need to stop and that parents need to stop and that leaders need to stop. And the other one was called Ed Reform. Actually, at the beginning, the first go around, it was a recovery mode as it related to COVID and getting back to typical after we were all in remote and hybrid learning. And so I thought it was time for us to reintroduce ARM at that time, and we did. And so if you have or were interested in getting Ed Reform, it's in chapter 3 there, where we talk specifically about trauma-informed practices and what to do as it relates to getting back after COVID. And so this model can really be used for anything, but it's very helpful, especially for us and our passion for mental healthiness. We've been using it for mental healthiness overall. And so we started already with acknowledging, when you were talking about your summit, or whether or not you were at the base camp or whether you were surveying the mountain, when you think about your school or your classroom or your district, it's really important to take inventory of where you are as you continue to move forward. And Mindy, I hear that, hanging on about halfway on the cliff, one hand and on one foot. A lot of us feel that way on a daily basis. And yes, and for us, again, it's a lot easier as it relates to our kids because we feel like that's our job, right? And really important as we talk about our kids in our classroom is, how are we taking inventory of our students and their mental healthiness and where they're at? There's a couple of ideas up there. So the student inventory, the ACEs, is a great way to see where our students are currently. And at the high school level, I know it's a little bit difficult even for my staff. So we do it for all of our students when they come into our advisory, after we already have the relationships, right? Because a lot of our times our students don't want to share their results unless they have the relationships with our students. So we got to be really mindful of that. And again, if you don't know what ACEs stand for, it's adverse childhood experiences. So they're looking at and they're identifying things that have already happened to them, traumatic experience, potentially violence that have already happened that are going to affect likely, where they're at, how they respond to different things. And for us, it allows us to align resources and also be really mindful about how they are currently responding. Another one that I really, really like, and I don't know if you're aware of, is the 40 developmental assets. I really, really dig that. It's really about looking at the protective factors, and I've done it with my staff before in the past as well, that people have experienced. And it's more from a proactive, like if somebody has all 40 assets, then their likelihood of having lifelong sustainable happiness is allegedly supposed to increase significantly. And so it looks like how many people, close friends, do they have in their life? Whether or not they have a connection to spirituality, and there's 40 of them. And it's a great conversation starter, but from a school perspective, from a leadership perspective, it's how can we continue to, and we talk about that balance, right? Shift that scale so that we're adding on proactively these opportunities, these access, going back to the definition of school happiness agency, these experiences that what the things that are outside of our control that we can balance out and make inside our control. And when we talk about ourselves as well, I got to be honest, when you look at it, you may have 25, 26 of the developmental attributes, but you can add them to yourself as well. And there's things that you can do and shift that up to a higher number and shift that paradigm for you as well. So that's really important. There are plenty of other free inventories as well. I don't know, and you'll hear me talk about them a lot, but the National Alliance of Mental Illness, on the last slide, South Carolina has a very, very active NAMI group out there, and I encourage you to reach out to them. They're amazing. I know in Delaware, our Delaware NAMI, especially in the Newcastle County area, I mean, they are complete partners with us and thought partners, and they work with us and come out to our schools. They can provide anything from housing for some areas in some states to information, connections to therapists. In crisis situations, they're great to connect you where you need to go. And they're just a great resource to have. So I encourage you to look at that as well. But they also have on their websites, the national website or the South Carolina website for NAMI, different inventories that you can use as well. And we'll talk about this later, as well as other professional developments and presentations that are free for schools, communities, and et cetera. And when we're taking inventory and when we're acknowledging, it's so very important for mental health in general. I don't know if you may have read Lost Connections by Johan Yari, but he talks specifically about acknowledging, and he talks about a study that happened in England, and it was many years ago, but all doctors had done at this time was acknowledge traumas that had happened, in particular to these women aged 20 to 50 that were experiencing some kind of depression. But their physical doctors, or primary health doctors, as we would call them in the United States, all they did was acknowledge these traumas. And by acknowledging these traumas in their physical checkups and saying, I'm aware that this had happened because it had to come out somewhere in their medical history, asking about it, checking in with them, that the incidence of depression and requests for medication had dropped by, I don't remember the exact number, but it was pretty high. It was in the double digits, just by acknowledging that something had happened by a trusted adult. So acknowledgement, I cannot say enough about it. It's really important, even in just assessing, but acknowledging where we are as we move forward. So we come to the R in reflection. So we all know in education how important reflection is for so many different reasons. And so we have reflection as just gratitude reflection, where we're at as a school, where we're at as individuals, and then really important, where our kids are as it relates to mental healthiness. So we have kids reflect on different writing prompts or perhaps their progress, but really reflect on their mental healthiness and how they move forward. So a couple of things that we've done at Sarah Pyle Academy at the SPA. So right before breaks, we noticed that we have a significant decline in our overall mental healthiness of our population. Either our kids don't want to be away from us, they don't like being home, or for whatever the reason, there's plenty of reasons. But all of a sudden we noticed a decline, and this has been going on for years. So we started a happiness challenge so the kids could reflect on things that potentially were going well in their world. They also did like an act of kindness or identified an act of kindness, as well as something that made them happier that they were looking forward to. So we did that for 10 days right before break, kind of to refocus their brain, to rewire their brain, looking for things that are positive. I like to call that the Jeep effect. If anybody has a Jeep, and you know the Jeep wave, once you have a Jeep, you can see Jeeps everywhere. It's kind of like Tetris. Once you play Tetris, you can figure out shapes and stuff to fit in everywhere. But again, reprogramming their mind. So that's a great way to reflect. And an example that I love to use is the power of reflection. As it relates to our school or our district, reflecting on what do we currently have? How are we leveraging? How are we moving forward in this process in a real meaningful way to see and identify where we may have gaps? And then also in that same way that we were talking about our students and positive rewiring, one practice that I do with my staff is before every single meeting, we identify all that's right in our SPA world. And so I know it gets tedious sometimes, and I know my staff gets annoyed at me sometimes, but everybody reports out either one thing that they're proud of, one thing that they're looking forward to, or something that's gone good that week, even on the worst weeks. And it really does change the dynamic of our meetings and our overall well-being, because even when things have been awfully stressful, just identifying one positive thing is a great way to change the way we feel in that continuum in that moment and that shift, even if we were feeling like we were struggling, so that we can slowly bring us back to a place where we can get closer to thriving. So that brings us to our first M, which is modeling. And it is what it sounds like. What are your actions saying? So I'm going to give a few examples here. So our counselor, Laura Malmstrom, one of my counselors at my Newark office here at Sarah Pyle Academy, for the longest time, she's been using her pronouns, she, her, hers. I saw Todd has that. I have my pronouns also. It's a little thing that normalizes being able to use pronouns and preferred pronouns. Seems so trivial, so speaks volumes so loudly. Another example is, what is it that you're doing? You know, are you rewarding martyrdom? Are you at work now? Tonight I am at work late. However, that's because my Wi-Fi was better here and I have 3 people home sick. So it made more sense for me to be at work tonight. But, you know, are you at work all the time and then telling everybody else to take a mental health break or to be with their family? You, going back to we spill what we feel, are so important to this model. Long gone are the days to do what I say, not do what I do, right? So if you think that you can get away with doing things that are not mentally healthy or towards our overall well-being, you're absolutely uncategorically wrong. You might get a little bit of a shift on that pendulum, but people are watching you and you set the tone as a leader or as a teacher in the classroom or as a counselor. So know that it starts with you. And then Positive Sign Thursday, I'm going to get to this in a second, but also thinking about our policies as well. Like if we talk about family as being important for our school district, then how are our policies and practices mirroring that? So for example, first day of school. If a staff member has a first day of school for one of their children at home, and this is a big one and near and dear to my heart, are they allowed to be able to go to that child's first day of school and we'll cover them in-house? Or do they have to stress out and pick between their personal children or their professional children? Because that's really not a pick at all, you know? And so things like at the spa, we make sure that we cover internally. I've never had a problem with anybody taking advantage. They get to take their kids to school. We cover at the school, and then we celebrate later at the day, in the day with all of our staff and all of our kids so that they feel like they were there for that big welcome. Policy and practices aligning with what we say is important to our school. Positive Sign Thursday. So I had said in the very beginning as well that I had the blessed opportunity to work with so many brilliant people and like-minded people. So right here, Brian McCann and Martin, they are just phenomenal educators. And Brian has been doing this for years. And if you are on Twitter at all, I'm sure you've come across him in education. He's been doing Positive Sign Thursday, although he did retire this year. So I've been missing his positive signs for many years. It started out as, you know, just a couple of Thursdays. And then, I mean, he just took off with that. And it's just one of those small ways every single Thursday with signs, with kids saying, today you are great. Keep doing what you're doing. Smile. Seniors are thriving, whatever the message may be. But he's out there with his kids, promoting his school, putting their face all over the place, of course, asking for permission, and just really creating this culture of positiveness and about overall well-being, and then sharing it over and over and over again. So many brilliant ideas out there, and we need to continue to share those as well. And then the last M, manifest, and it could also be monitoring. But manifest is, so now we know where we're at. We've reflected on what we have and where to move forward. We're modeling the practices, but how do we really make this come through to fruition in our classrooms and in our schools? So how do we really make sure that we can do this work? So for me, number one is train the skills. So I am a certified trainer in adult mental health first aid, youth mental health first aid, and teen mental health first aid. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I am completely biased as it relates to these programs because just like CPR and first aid, mental health first aid provides us with the common language and certification to be able to help recognize the warning signs. And we're going to see a slide about this in a second, of when there's a crisis, and stabilize adults, children, or teach our children how to do it with each other so that they can get the help that they need. Also, other opportunities to build our toolkits, right? So if we're giving it to our kids, what are we doing for our staff? Manifesting that in time. Like if we want and model for our staff for self-care, which by the way, self-care I think has been, what's the word? We've kind of like demonized it in some way, like, oh, just go get self-care. Teachers, you just got to go take care of yourself. You're frustrated, go home and read a book. And that's really not what self-care is completely. It could be autonomy. It could be giving the time to do what needs to be done. But we've kind of used that term in a way that really isn't helpful for our educators. And so it can't just be like, oh, go take care of yourself. We need to provide those opportunities. Again, going back to school happiness agency, and those experiences in a real authentic way, and for our kids as well. So we know a kid is struggling and just telling them, if you journal, you'll feel better. Well, what about that kid that just really doesn't like journaling, or doesn't trust that when they journal something that is going to be safe, or does not have a place where they feel like that is something that's really going to help them? So just being sure that we are manifesting all of these opportunities and all the stuff that we've learned, and acknowledging, reflecting, and modeling in a way that's really meaningful to get to that next step. So I had hinted about youth mental health first aid. So youth mental health first aid is from the National Center for Overall Wellbeing, used to be the National Council for Mental Health, and they rebrand it. And the training, the certification is like first aid training and CPR. It is a long training, and it says 8 hours here, but it's actually 6.5 hours. And since COVID, it is blended now or completely virtual. One of the things that I like about it, and that I have done for my school, so my staff is 100% youth mental health first aid. And you're going to see a little video about our students. We were one of the piloted student schools of the first 50 in the United States that had the privilege to pilot teen mental health first aid. And the premise behind teen mental health first aid, and this is really only for high school, is that youth is going to go to another youth before going to an adult. So giving them the tools and providing them the great privilege of living without regret, knowing that they've done and had the tools, everything that they potentially could in the event that they were in a crisis situation with a friend. But there are so many other programs out there. There's QPR. There are, for us in Delaware, the Bo Biden Foundation had a series out on mental health. The reality is you just need to do something and start somewhere. NAMI, if you reach out to the South Carolina NAMI, we started with Ending the Silence, which is a presentation normalizing the conversation and common language around mental healthiness. So that could be a good place to start. There's also NAMI Basics, and that those presentations and those trainings are free. So that's a great place to start as well. In South Carolina, there may be a plethora of other organizations that provide that kind of training, but really the importance is having those tools and then continuing to build on those tools as you move forward, to continue to grow that toolkit, right? Because the last thing you want to do is be stagnant and not continue to move forward. I just this past week retrained my staff in youth mental health first aid, because I had a couple of new staff members and we hadn't been trained since COVID. So we retrained. And it was funny because as we were doing the training, so many things, it just seemed like we didn't remember. And so it was a great opportunity for us to see how important retraining was. And then, like I said, the teen mental health first aid is okay not to be okay. You can't mental health first aid train for teens unless at least a certain percentage, and I don't know what the exact rule is right now, I think it's 20% of your staff is youth mental health first aid. Again, I say that going back to that graphic about where you are in your journey, you're going to hear from my students about their experience and how much they liked youth mental health, teen mental health first aid, but you can't start there, right? So, I mean, I encourage you to potentially, if you are just looking at the mountain right now and surveying where you are, to get together a group of champions in your building and find an idea about how to move forward with a plan. Again, acknowledging where you are, reflecting on what you have so that you can move forward in a meaningful way. Because just starting that conversation, even just normalizing mentally healthy conversations, like shifting the conversation from saying committed suicide to died by suicide. Because in the mentally healthy community, we no longer say committed suicide because it brings on thoughts of committing a crime instead of dying by suicide. It's, you know, when somebody dies by suicide, they're not committing suicide. Or calling out if somebody says, you know, the weather's so bipolar right now. That's not okay. You would never say the weather's so diabetic right now, but we have normalized these stigmas around mental health. And just as a side, the number one reason that adults and youth do not get treatment or seek help is because of stigma, still today in 2022. So it's so very important that we start that shift and that paradigm shift from surviving to thriving. And it starts with just little things like common language. So, as I have already set up, I'm going to give you a little taste of the teen mental health first aid when it's done for my students. So, I'm also going to kind of frame this. So, we had the opportunity to do a live look-in right as COVID started going into hybrid world. So, my spa. Our kids still weren't in our buildings yet. So our staff started coming into our buildings. Our students were still engaged remotely. And we had this live look-in. So this live look-in was really us talking with kids outside remotely in the building. But, you know, I never turned down an opportunity to talk about our program and our phenomenal, as I like to say, our phenomenal staff and students. So we put together this little presentation, which included this clip. So kind of give you a little idea of where we're coming from here. So let me play this. Oh, maybe it's not going to work. All right, guys. Well, it's not going to work. However, two of our students talk about mental health first aid as a youth. And one student, Jamas, he shares that, you know, actually I asked him, I say, Jamas, you know, it's so interesting because when you were doing the training, by the way, youth mental health first aid is a huge, teen mental health first aid is a huge lift. So just keep that in mind, but so powerful. That he completely acted like he was not engaged and really didn't want to be involved in the program. Now, one of the premise for teen mental health first aid is that you have to train an entire grade band. And for me, I trained my entire school because my school is smaller and it just made the most sense. And so the premise with that is that you want to train everybody, not just the handpicked honor students or the athletes or the kids that want to, because all of the kids at that age, that grade band, are going to be experiencing somebody, or you just don't know who they're going to be experiencing. So you wanted to have that entire band trained. And then as you continue to train, eventually you will train the entire school. So people could opt out, but the intention is to train everybody and volunteer and not volunteer as it relates to teen mental health first aid. So Jamas, as with many other kids, you know, they were acting like they were not engaged, didn't participate very much. And again, right before and as COVID, we were engaging in COVID, Jamas had reached out and his girlfriend was in crisis. And he said that although the content had made him uncomfortable, he knew that it was going to be important to him as he moved forward. And that he just thinks that every kid, every high schooler needs it and should have it because it was something that was really important to him. And he also really enjoyed the recovery pose, as well as 741-741, the text line, and he used it well, often rather. And then we had another student, Sydney, and she shared that she believed that a friend reached out to her at least 2 to 3 times a week about some sort of crisis. And she felt like she could be a better friend and that she had the tools to handle it better and without regret. She thinks that she was probably handling it okay, but she didn't know if she was handling it okay. And she knew the warning signs now moving forward when it likely was going to be or potentially a crisis situation. Those 2 things right there are absolutely huge. And again, for me, having our kids not carry the burden of others' mental healthiness, and so that because they're already carrying their own, was super, super important. Oh, sorry. So, and then another thing about Manifest, and I said that it's also monitoring. And so it's great that we have all these things, but how are we monitoring these intentional actions that we're putting out there? So just like any other academic or non-academic program that we have in our school or in our classroom to see how we're moving forward, you know, baseline data, and then also data as we move on. So this was one example at our school. So we often, probably too often, but I don't think too often, are assessing where our kids are relative to how they feel as an entire program, how they feel relative to belonging, how often they feel happy, how often they feel sad. Delaware does a state assessment on climate that includes questions around bullying, questions around belonging, happiness. And I'm very happy to report that 90% of our kids felt happy at school over, I think it was like 4 or 5, it may have been 5 days a week. I can't remember. I was really happy about that, but there's still a little bit of work that we need, a lot of work that we need to do. But more importantly, we were at 95% of our students that felt like they belonged. And that is just so huge as it relates to overall well-being. And for all of us, you know, it takes one trusted adult to reduce the overall impact of trauma and mental overall well-being. So one trusted adult. So the fact that our kids feel like they belonged and that they connect was huge to us, and knowing that we were doing what we needed to do. Our data wasn't always that way. And it's because we continue to monitor these intentional actions and the professional development that we provide and the activities. So way back in our journey, I used to come over the PA and we would do a mindfulness activity that I would do over 30 seconds to 4 minutes, depending on the mindfulness meditation that I found or I read on Mindful or what have you. And then we were surveying the kids about things that we should continue to do or to sundown or what have you. And then by and large, our kids said that enough. They were tired of hearing MacBury and it really wasn't helping. And if it was helping, it wasn't helping during that time. And if we could do it in a different way. And so that was some practice that we stopped doing based on our students and their feedback. And it was okay because it was really a stressful engagement for me because I had to figure out what I was doing every day and meditating. And sometimes I felt like I was meta-freaking-tating and it wasn't a good time for me to get into that space. But it's really important to monitor our intentional actions as we move forward. So we're not just doing it to do it. Again, going back to that definition of school happiness agency, you know, those intentional actions need to be meaningful. And then, so we're not gonna be able to see this video either. I'm talking about our journey as Sarah Pyle Academy. We have had, well, first off, I have the absolute most amazing team on this earth. And sorry, but I really do. I mean, we've just organically grown this program to really be mindful at looking at taking care of our kids at our needs level. And it's not easy. And there's had to be lots of difficult conversations. But we've just incorporated so many protective factors for our students. And that is our focus. We are constantly trying to change that paradigm shift. We want our students thriving. And every day is still a struggle. I mean, I had a student yesterday that we had to call mobile crisis for, which is awesome. Getting them the resources, they're talking about it, moving forward. But again, not toxic positivity. There's still going to be challenges. It's knowing what to do and how to move forward, and making sure that we're taking care of everybody on our teams and for our school. Okay, so I did a lot of talking, shared a lot of information. It's really important that we know that we can allow ourselves to be beginners. Again, my program has been working on this for so many years. We started with activities like maybe an advisory, also doing yoga, to all the way right before the pandemic, we were doing lunch and learns where our kids had opportunities to eat lunch with their advisory and do play basketball, play cards, just to build those connections. To this year, we have a whole nother evolution on how we're moving forward with that. We're all beginners at some point, and it's really important to recognize that it's okay to be there. It's okay not to be okay. And it's okay not to be an expert in this field. I still don't feel anywhere near an expert. And then I actually got this tattooed to my arms because it just means that much to me. Do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. Going back to mental health first aid, I think that's probably one of the most important things to me, is that now that we know better, now that we can do better, now that we can recognize the signs of crisis, how do we move forward? The ACE assessment for our students, once we know that information, how do we do better by those kids? It's really hard to get frustrated with the kid who we say is attention seeking, when more likely they're connection seeking now that we have that full picture. It's difficult to have that information, but it's so important to know better so that we can do better and adopt that mindset to move forward. Yes, there's plenty on our plate, but now Noddings also says that happy people are also very rarely mean, violent, or cruel. And so the happier we all are, again, not looking at toxic positivity, the better our environment will be as we move forward and as we continue to take care of each other. All right, so your next steps. So wherever you are on that journey, acknowledge where you are and where you want to be. Simple as that. In your classroom, as a team of champions, as a district, wherever you are and whatever your role is and wherever your hat is. As an individual, as a mom, as a dad, as a sister, acknowledge where you are in your mental healthiness. Reflect on what obstacles you have. So how and what's in the way to move forward, and what do you currently have to remove those obstacles and barriers or tools in your toolkit. Super easy sounds, but it's going to take a little bit of work and a lot of real deep reflection on where you would need to be. And then model leadership and policy. Remember that policy is super important too. And modeling starts with you, whatever your role is, even if it's just for you. Super important, cannot emphasize it enough. If you don't remember anything else from today, please take that with you. And then manifest, give it life, time, opportunity, and remember to monitor it. People only respect what you inspect. And so if you're not paying attention to how it's changing or ebbing and flowing, then you're not going to be able to have that evolution in a meaningful way. And then give yourself grace. So I make mistakes every single solitary day, both personally and professionally. When you're empty, refill. And grace for each other, grace for mistakes, grace for our kids. I know that there's always tomorrow to start over, right? There's no better advice than that. Mindfulness, connection, just fill that cup up with all of the things that you want to continue to spill, because things are going to happen. You're going to spill. Somebody's going to act out. There's going to be a kid that's looking for connection, and they're going to be looking for connection so fiercely that they are going to rock that cup. And so what's coming out of that cup, right? If you're not the one, that's okay. Find somebody else, because if your cup is empty, you're not going to be good for anybody. So find somebody else that can be that connection. and that person for whomever may be needing that. This is a couple of my students, one of the girl with her face in there, she was really struggling, and that's a text, I believe, I don't remember, yes, that she was just talking about her awesome experience. She had recently graduated from SPA. She was working at BJ's, which is a wholesale food place. I'm not sure if you guys have it out there in South Carolina, and like Costco as well. And the fact that she was still talking about her Sarah Pyle experience is super important, because our kids are counting on us, and they deserve us to be the very best we can be, so they can. And our visions and mission at Sarah Pyle Academy is together providing lifelong success through personalization, so they can be successful after graduating. And part of being successful, lifelong success, is knowing what makes them happy, is being someone who understands what mentally healthy is. You don't have to, you can be somebody with mental health challenges and still have mental healthiness for all of us all the time. That's a picture of my son right there. Our son, he is counting on you. He graduated. He had made an attempt on his life in February 2019. I thought it was the end of the world for me, somebody who is an advocate for mental health education, a principal. My wife and I are both in education and advocates, and how did we miss this? I talk about missing information and making mistakes. It happens. It's hard to see things that are right in front of your face and in your own home sometimes. But that is him. He graduated 2 years ago. He is a sophomore at Northern Michigan University. He's given me permission to share his story, and he is thriving. He still struggles, but he is thriving. And he is thriving because of the efforts of administrators at his school, one in particular, Steve Silva. I'm going to shout him out right now. But the role of the school was so vital in his recovery. And so please don't underestimate the role of you and of your school. Joey wouldn't be where he is. And again, I miss the signs. So I've come to grips with that, but it is so important. We have the kids for 7.5 hours a day, and understanding and knowing recognizing the warning signs. So whatever the training is, doesn't necessarily need to be mental health first aid. Please make sure that you're doing that for yourself and for your schools. Couple of resources for you. I saw that Todd had put up NAMI up there as well. The Trevor hotline is so important for our LGBTQ plus youth. Our LGBTQ plus youth. It is not a mental health challenge. However, they experience discrimination and challenges because of the discrimination and harassment a lot of times that they encounter, 40% more times than typical youth. And so it's really, really important that we are being really mindful. And again, a really important thing to remember, our LGBT plus youth using their preferred pronouns and preferred names can reduce the incidence and ideation of suicide by over 40%. So just by using preferred pronouns, the fact that we can help that much relative to their overall well-being is something that should be easy peasy lemon squeezy. We should be doing that all the time, all day, every day, without even thinking. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline 988, that is brand new within the past 6 months, and there's been so much advocacy and work on that. So just like 911, you call 988 anywhere in the country, and it will connect you automatically to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline specialist. And there may be a few reroutes and a couple of rural places in the United States, but it will get you the help that you need. And then South Carolina Suicide and Crisis, sorry, there's a typo there, hotline 24 hours a day, that 877 number, if you want to take a picture of that. And then if you want, there's Padlet with some more resources on there. And if you use the QR code, there's some more information for me. Whew, I can talk, can I?
Oh, that was awesome. Thank you so much. So much information there. I really, there's so many things that I thought about, but this idea of what we fill ourselves up with is what comes out. And that's one of the things that I've talked to about a lot of times when we talk to educators about self-care, about mindfulness and things. It's a lot of times things are framed like, how do we get this to students? But really it starts with the people, the adults in the building, taking care of their own mental health needs. And I think Mindy kind of referred to that, how a lot of times our mindset and our view is outside. How do we help students with this stuff? And really it has to start from within. I think that's such an important message for the adults in the building, to take good care of themselves and their own mental health. And then you can have the capacity, I think, to be better equipped and better in place to help students with their mental health.
Absolutely. And as leaders, we need to make sure that we're giving that space and an opportunity for them to do that too.
Yeah. Lots of great stuff there, and I appreciate the information, especially there at the end about the LGBTQ plus students and educators. Really important information there, and something that we've got to get rid of some of these narratives that are holding us back from doing what those young people need. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for having me out.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you. So that's Kristina MacBury. If you would like to contact her, just rewind this a little bit. She's got the QR code that you can check out and get in touch with her. As you can see, scrolling along the bottom of the screen, we would love to have you as a part of our movement. Our movement is built to promote the kind of things that you're seeing on these live streams that we do. It's built to help improve the lives of public school employees and students. And we need everybody on board with this movement. So if you're interested in joining our movement, you can go to jointhescea.org, or you can text the word join to 48744. I want to remind everybody, please, if you don't know about Lisa, go to lisa4sc.com. You can follow her on social media at Lisa4sc. We are so proud to be the only teacher association that is endorsing Lisa Ellis. We encourage everybody to get registered to vote. Make sure you go to the SCEA.org/votes for more information. You can learn about how to get registered, making sure that your registration is correct and everything's in line. And please go out and get your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your neighbors, your cousins, your second cousins, and everybody, and encourage them to make sure they're registered to vote, especially your education colleagues as well. Make sure that they all are aware of the importance of this election to our schools. Critical importance. Now, coming up on Thursday, we have Mitch Weisberg, who's going to be talking about mind shifting and growth mindset and critical thinking for impactful educators. That'll start at 7 o'clock Eastern time. We hope you'll join us for that and look forward to that session. And again, I want to thank Kristina for all of the wisdom that she shared with us tonight. Thank you for tuning in to this live stream. So happy, so proud to be a part of the South Carolina Education Association. We'd love to have you as a part of that movement as well. We'll see you on Thursday. Have a great week, everybody.